This best-selling watch that went out of stock multiple times will redeem your boring watch collection, according to some reviewers. So in this video, we're gonna find out if this $500 supposed steal of a watch, the Venezianico Redentore UltraBlack, with a dial blacker than your ex's heart, will actually live up to its hefty claims. Full disclosure, Venezianico did send me this watch and I don't have to send it back, but of course they don't have any input on the content of this video, so my opinions are completely my own. And also, I guess something worth mentioning is that I actually reached out to them because I was quite intrigued with this particular watch and I wanted to check it out because there were a ton of reviewers raving about this particular watch. Now, I normally don't talk about my unboxing experience with a particular watch because frankly, I don't find it all that interesting, but I think it's worth mentioning for this particular watch because Venezianico knocked it out of the park with their unboxing experience. So it shipped with this sumptuous white packaging with a bunch of different compartments, and it came with a map of Venice and a user manual that was very, very well executed with a whole bunch of different photos and about me parts in the user manual, and it also came with a certification of authenticity. And I know that this may not seem important to most of you out there, but I think that it's really nice to have a touch of luxury in this very objectively luxurious hobby, because when you think about it, spending $500, $100 on a watch that just tells the time is quite unreasonable. So I think getting a company to really put the effort in to impress the customer is something worth commending. So let's get into the meat and potatoes of this particular watch, and it's of course this stunning black H.Mosed dial. And H.Mosed black is actually one of the blackest black paints on earth. It's not the blackest paint. There is another black color called Vantablack, which actually absorbs, I believe, 99.96% of all visible light, but H.Mosed black absorbs 99.4% of all visible light, meaning that only 0.6% of visible light is reflected off of this particular dial. And now you're probably thinking, well, I can see some reflections on that watch in the B-roll, but that's actually the reflections of the sapphire crystal, not the dial itself. I really didn't see any reflections of the crystal unless it was directly in front of a visible light source. In most cases, when you're looking at this watch, it just looks like a deep, rich black. And now the reason I want to focus on the dial, outside the fact that it's the centerpiece of this entire watch, is that it's actually really difficult to work with H.Mosed black. And that's because if you touch it, you actually ruin the paint. And if you get specks of dust on it, you also ruin the watch because it's extremely noticeable to a consumer, to anyone looking at the watch, if there are specks of dust underneath the crystal. And that's actually extremely difficult to do. I've never made a watch without specks of dust under the crystal, so I really once again commend Venezianico for doing this. And you know, you're thinking, well, that's just the least they could do. Well, if you look at other comparable brands at this price point, such as Seiko, they actually have very blatant QC issues, such as misaligned bezels. So I can't imagine what their rendition of a H.Mosed black dial would look like at this price point. So well done, Venezianico. So if you're enjoying this video, I would definitely recommend hitting the like and subscribe button, and if you were to comment down below what your thoughts are on this particular watch, what you're wearing now, just start a conversation, as I always respond to almost every single one, if not all of your comments. Also, I want to ask you if you think that this watch looks more dressy or more casual, because I was actually having a conversation about this with my mom, and I said, I think it could actually be a little bit of both. And the reason for that is because this has a polished bezel, so it looks very dressy, as you can tell with my whole outfit. It suits the outfit. I think that this could be a very dressy watch. However, if you look at the flanks of the watch and you look at the crown guard, it's actually very finely brushed. And so of course, I don't think that this is a sports watch, but I think that it could be deemed a casual watch with those features. This watch is finished very well, in my opinion. If you look at the flanks of the watch, personally, that's where I'm most interested in, because although this polished bezel and polished lugs look really, really stunning from head on. I think that most of the nuances of this design come from the sides, because if you look at the flanks, the brushing is just extremely, extremely fine, and you'll see that there is actually some anglage and some chamfering on the bezel itself. It's a little bit difficult to capture on camera. There's also a whole bunch of different anglage near the crown guards, and I also am a huge fan of this crown, and I think it has to do with Venezianico's logo. And as cheesy as this sounds, when I went to Rome, Italy, not Venice, I saw a ton of different basilicas, a lot of different churches, and I learned about how important churches are to Italian history. So I think that this really does a good job at harkening back at that particular aspect of Italian history, and I think just the design itself looks really, really good, and I appreciate that this crown is brushed and signed. This also comes with a great Italian leather strap that smells like real leather, unlike some of these AliExpress brands that ship you plasticky leather straps. This actually is real Italian leather. Now, mind you, I don't believe that this is the best leather strap you will get from Italy, because I can tell that they have applied some coating onto this leather to, I would assume, remove some of the blemishes so it's not full grain leather. I actually did a whole deep dive into leather one night, so I'll put up a chart here, the different types of leather if you're interested. At this $500 price point, USD mind you, this actually does offer a pretty nice leather strap. This watch is a great conversation starter in any sort of context. There's a sea of boring stainless steel sport watches, and in that sea, this particular watch stands out. Why? Because it's minimalist. There's no indices, there's no numerals, there's no color. And I think that just makes it really unique, and it stands out in a good way. Even with the avid watch collectors who have all the watches in the world, I still believe that if they saw this watch, they would take a step back and ask you, hey, what's that watch? Because it's just that unique. Yeah, also this comes on a black leather strap, and you can get it with a bracelet, but I personally wouldn't recommend that because I don't think it works as well with this particular dressy casual aesthetic. When I first saw this watch, I thought, hey, that kind of looks like a Movado. But when I started seeing B-roll of it online, and especially when it came in the mail and I saw it in person, I realized that the execution of this Venezianico UltraBlack Redentore is what the Movado aspires to be. The Movado tries to be elegant, whereas the Venezianico actually is elegant. So, dimensions. This comes in 36 millimeters in terms of its diameter, 18 millimeter lug width, and 42.2 millimeters in lug to lug. This also comes at 40 millimeters in diameter and 20 millimeters in terms of lug width if you have a larger wrist. Just in terms of its wearing experience, this is a very, very comfortable watch to put on wrist, and it's partially due to the fact that it's quite classically sized, and you don't really feel like there's anything weighing down your wrist, whereas when I'm wearing my stainless steel watches with a full stainless steel bracelet, it does remind me that I'm still wearing a watch. But considering that this is a dressy watch, I don't believe that dressy/casual watches should have a noticeable presence on your wrist. You do have to break in this leather strap because it comes quite stiff in the box, and I'm currently in the process of really conforming this leather strap to my wrist. This comes with an NH35, so that's 40 hours of power reserve. And in terms of accuracy, this has been running about plus 10 seconds per day. And this comes with 50 meters of water resistance. And it also comes with 100 meters of water resistance if you get the 40 millimeter diameter version. And the reason for that is because this has a screw down case back, whereas that has a screw down case back. Personally, I don't find water resistance to be a huge factor in this discussion about this particular watch because it is a dressy/casual watch. So I don't really see myself diving into a pool using this watch. And this has a sapphire crystal. So there's no lume on this particular watch, and in terms of legibility, although you can't tell the exact time down to the minute because of how black this dial is and how sharp and reflective those Dauphine hands are. Even looking at it from an angle, I can tell where the hands are on this watch. I also just want to ask you what your thoughts are on the B-roll of this particular watch. I usually shoot my B-roll outside, and this time I tried to put more effort into shooting B-roll than I normally do by setting up a whole lighting fixture. And I just want to ask you what your thoughts are on the B-roll of this particular video, and if you prefer outdoor B-roll versus the indoor B-roll. So just tell me in the comments down below. Really helpful, really appreciated. Thank you so much. The case back looks a little bit strange, and I know that this particular watch tries to really play with the motif of space, but I don't think that this motif is carried throughout the rest of the watch to the extent that it warrants a space-themed case back. So I think that's a little bit strange. Additionally, this has an NH35 ghost date, which is not great for a watch, and I think that's one of the areas that this watch is not actually refined. Everything in this watch is refined except for the movement. Also, the fact that it has a snap-on case back, I would just prefer that they had a screw-on case back. And even though I mentioned that water resistance isn't a huge deal with this particular watch, I'm pretty sure that the reason they added a snap-on case back here was not to design it in a more optimized way, but rather just to cut down on costs. And the main criticism I have of this particular watch is that I think it's quite expensive for its hardware. So it has a sapphire crystal, an NH35, a Musso black dial, and a leather strap. And I don't think that this all equates to a $500 USD package. I think that it comes close to that price point, but for what's on offer, I think they could have lowered the price. So just for fun, I'll compare this to the H.Moser and Cie Venturer, and that's the sort of more expensive rival to this Venezianico, and it comes in at 25,000 US dollars. And when I mentioned Vantablack at the start, that particular watch uses Vantablack, which is the darkest color of black known to men, and they also have black polishing on the Venturer. And I prefer the Venezianico's watch design over H.Moser and Cie's 25K watch because I think that this watch is more multifaceted in a good and nuanced way, whereas H.Moser and Cie's, from what I can tell, isn't as nuanced. And I think the Dauphine hands here just work better with the dial, and I prefer the more angular-ish case and the logo on the dial, whereas H.Moser has a sterile dial. And of course, H.Moser and Cie's Venture has a lot of upsides compared to this particular watch. Like, it comes in white gold, and it's H.Moser and Cie. But in comparison to the H.Moser and Cie, this does seem like a steal. Just comment down below what you think of the two watches and which design you prefer. Also, if you are not a huge fan of this particular watch from Venezianico, I would definitely recommend checking out some of their other watches because they have a lot of different interesting watches on offer. So funnily enough, when I went to Italy, I was looking to buy a watch, and I actually did want to go to Venezianico's boutique. But when we went to Italy, we didn't end up going to Venice. We stayed in Rome, we went to Pompeii, but we didn't go to northern Italy. So in a way, this is my little taste of Venice without actually being in Venice. Although this watch brand lacks the heritage that some other watch brands have, I wouldn't dock points from it because this watch brand was only created in 2017, so they didn't have that much time to create a heritage in a span of 7 years. Another thing I want to mention is that there aren't a ton of different Italian watch brands. You have Panerai, you have Unimatic, and oh wait, that's the only ones I can think of. There's a unique aspect of this watch is that it's an Italian watch, and of course the parts aren't fully Italian. And if you're interested in looking at some watch photos, I have an Instagram and I have a Watch Crunch account where I post photos of my watches and you get a little sneak peek into my next review. Let's just talk about now if this watch is right for you with all of that in mind. And my conclusion is, if you appreciate what this watch is offering, the software of this watch, not the hardware, not the Seiko NH35, not the fact that it only has 50 meters of water resistance, but rather the nuanced things that you cannot put on a spec sheet, such as the refined brushing and polishing and the way that the watch looks and fits on your wrist, the way that the Musso Black eats light for breakfast, the way that the watch sits on your wrist. in a classically sized manner, and the fact that it executes a minimalist design without being boring, in my opinion. If you appreciate the things that you cannot put on a spec sheet, if you appreciate all that, then I think that this watch is worth it for you. So I want to thank you so much for getting to the end of this video. I truly appreciate it. If you're interested, I'd recommend watching some of the videos listed over here, and I will see you on another episode on the time ticker.